that line should be drawn right here.
You know, to say that Iran doesn't practice terrorism is like saying Derek Jeter never played shortstop for the New York Yankees.
Before Iran completes the second stage of nuclear enrichment, ladies and gentlemen, if it looks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, Mr. Zarif, do you recognize this? You should. It's yours. Then what is it? What is it? That's right. It's a duck, but this duck is a nuclear duck. You can take back with you a message to the tyrants of Tehran. Do not test Israel's resolve.
Few leaders in the world have captivated international attention quite like Israeli Prime Minister Beniamин Netaняху. A product of an American education and upbringing with a close bond to the Jewish diaspora, he has spent more time outside of Israel than any of his predecessors and is obsessed with his image on the world stage. When he was invited to speak before the U.S. Congress by the Republican opposition, he earned more standing ovations than President Barack Obama did in his State of the Union address. In foreign capitals, he laps up media attention and has seldom met a camera he didn't like.
The Israelis, who are quite provincial, they like to see their leaders speaking good English and being accepted by world leaders like Netanyahu does.
He never stopped trying to improve himself as a politician. He's completely dedicated to be a politician. He works relentlessly on his character, on his charisma, on his base. He's like a newborn in politics. He has the same enthusiasm like he had 30 years ago.
But above all, and that's the main secret of Netanyahu, he created an unprecedented situation in which most of Israelis, leftists and right-wingers, believe that there is no one else but him.
To consolidate his hold on power, Netanyahu has bulldozed Israeli media, currying favor with billionaire media barons, ignoring local reporters, and punishing others with stinging lawsuits. But his obsession with media domination and political control has come back to haunt him.
Israel's Prime Minister Beniamин Netaняху could be facing several efficient charges over his alleged involvement in corruption cases.
Netanyahu was caught on tape trying to help an Israeli newspaper publisher with his newspaper in return for favorable coverage. In another case, he's accused of accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of gifts from several businessmen.
Tonight, in a televised speech, he called the police move baseless and said it would end in nothing.
For over a year leading up to the police recommendation, tens of thousands of Israelis have taken to the streets in protests just like this one across the country to demand Benjamin Netanyahu, the man who's been dubbed their prime minister, be held accountable.
One man who's led the demonstrations is Meni Naftali. Once a maintenance worker at the Prime Minister's residence, Naftali won a case against Netanyahu's wife, Sarah, in 2016. He was awarded just under $44,000 for verbal and emotional abuse he suffered while working for them. He's now at the forefront of the protests.
The Prime Minister is afraid of demonstrations. In 2011, when I worked in the Prime Minister's residence, there were very big demonstrations. He greatly fears having to leave office because of these protests. Our message is that we've had enough with government corruption. In the past, every other family had someone who was harmed by terrorism. Today, every other family is harmed by government corruption.
What was it like working for the Netanyahus?
At first, it was fine. Over time, I began to understand what was happening in the Prime Minister's residence. I realized that this house determines what happens to the State of Israel. The house's residents receive everything they want. That's why they don't know what the people need. They're so strong that they think if they were in the U.S., that Benjamin Netanyahu could be the U.S. president. That's why they can't help the weak, the disabled, Holocaust survivors, the elderly, etc.
We know now the pattern, and the pattern is that she's shouting, she has this rage attacks, she has a big influence.
In fact, Sarah herself was alerted by Israel's Attorney General last year that she'd soon be facing fraud charges over misuse of public funds. So what exactly are the cases now mounting against Netanyahu? Israeli police are currently investigating 4 cases alleging corruption and bribery within Netanyahu's inner circle, and have recommended charges in 2 of those cases. Case 1000, which charges he accepted lavish gifts such as champagne, cigars, and jewelry for Sarah in exchange for political favors. Then there's Case 2000. Case 2000 highlights Netanyahu's cozy relationship with perhaps the world's most influential pro-Israel oligarch, Sheldon Adelson. A gambling mogul with casinos in Las Vegas and Macau, Adelson has pumped his millions into the operations of a who's who of Israel lobby groups, as well as Republican candidates from Mitt Romney to Donald Trump. As extreme as he is wealthy, Adelson publicly called for dropping a nuclear bomb on Iran and is widely credited with driving Trump's anti-Iran policy on behalf of Netanyahu. For years, Adelson's paper, Israel Hayom, published a strictly pro-Netanyahu line, but Case 2000 alleges the prime minister was willing to sacrifice his relationship with even his most generous benefactor in exchange for favorable coverage from another media titan, Arnon Moses, the CEO of the Israeli tabloid Yediot Aharonot.
Noni Moses was his worst enemy, and the newspaper published the most nasty articles about him, his family, his kids, and all the time was a huge critic of Yediot Aharonot and blamed Yediot Aharonot, and everything is wrong in the country. In the end, he was sitting with Noni Moses and discussing a bill that will stop the free giving of his opponent. And Moses told them, if you will give me this law, I will make you prime minister until whenever you will want. He's a lousy friend. He's not giving a favor back. And you can see what happened with Sheldon Adelson. He's a huge friend of him, and he opened a newspaper and lost hundreds of millions of shekels in order to open a newspaper that to support him. But one day, Netanyahu thought that he doesn't want Israel Today anymore. He went to his opponent, Noni Moses, and now he's under investigation, and he just dumped Sheldon Adelson just in one day, and they don't speak anymore. And this is Netanyahu. This is his personality. He was his best friend for 30 years, but then one day he thought is a problem for him. He just dumped him in the hole. And this is why many people who work with Netanyahu can't stand him anymore.
Now Adelson has joined the sharks circling Netanyahu as the prime minister treads perilous political waters. An indictment could be on the way, and then a dramatic court battle. Is this the end for Netanyahu? Not so fast.
He is the king of this base. The admiration that he has in his base is unbelievable. I don't think ever any prime minister in the history of Israel had this very powerful base, limited but very, very powerful, that really will burn themselves in order to serve the leader.
What do you think about what might be an indictment coming against the prime minister?
It's come against him from the media and the Israeli newspaper, and they cannot win him an election, so they are looking from the back door to pull him down, and it will not succeed because the majority of the country, they like him, he does a good job, and we don't want the left to control this country because it will be the end of this state.
He is the prime minister, the good prime minister of Israel, the first one that knows that only Israel, only for the state is only for Israel, not for everybody on. It's our state, it's our place, and he's the person that knows that this is ours, not someone else. There's people that say that's Bibi, he's right, left, I don't know. Bibi is the good person for our state.
I think Bibi is great for Israel. He loves Israel, and he cares more about Israel than what other people think, just like Donald Trump cares more about America than what the politicians think. Thank you very much.
Netanyahu's rise is the product of a decades-long political campaign that began in the United States. It all starts in upstate New York, where Netanyahu's father, Ben-Zion Milikovsky, served as the press secretary to the godfather of right-wing revisionist Zionism and the ideological lodestar of Israel's Likud party, Zev Jabotinsky. Benjamin learned at his father's knee, absorbing his intellectual energy and his hatred of Arabs. In a 2009 interview with an Israeli newspaper, Ben-Zion declared, "The Bible finds no worse image than that of the man from the desert, And why? Because he has no respect for any law. Because in the desert, he can do as he pleases. The tendency toward conflict is in the essence of the Arab.
Mr. Netanyahu is the son of his father. And he's more extreme than Begin. He criticized the Likud from the right all the time.
Benyamin Netanyahu was raised in suburban Philadelphia and studied at MIT. He even worked at Boston Consulting alongside Mitt Romney.
How would you describe Netanyahu's personality?
It's full of himself. Netanyahu is a very American, Republican, capitalist guy.
The young Netanyahu appeared on his way to a career in the American financial world. But then tragedy struck.
Netanyahu lives, or at least started his career, on the death of his brother.
His older brother, Yonatan, and the favorite son of his father, was killed during a raid against Palestinian hijackers at the Ugandan airfield of Entebbe. Yonatan Netanyahu's military elan became the stuff of legend and the subject of a dramatic Hollywood hit. Another action-packed depiction of the raid is set to be released in March 2018.
As soon as they know we're coming, they start to kill the men, the women, the children.
He rose to power only because of the death of his brother. Until his brother's death in '76, he was just a student in the United States. As the brother of Yoni that was immediately was branded as, and also, by the way, justified as a huge Israeli hero that sacrificed himself for the people. And he started like this, and he got this issue of the terror. In the beginning of his career, he was a very big speaker about the terror and how the West can defeat the terror.
As the right gathered power, Netanyahu's rise began. Netanyahu emerged in the Likud party as a minister under the right-wing firebrand and former Zionist militant Yitzhak Shamir. He was already demonstrating his knack for cynical public relations schemes, calling for Israel to carry out, quote, massive expulsions in the territories while the world was focused on Tiananmen Square. He was also polishing his skills in the American media environment.
Mr. Benjamin Netanyah.
Mr. Netanyah, welcome to the Advocate.
If Yoni Netanyahu is not killed in Entebbe, if Yoni Netanyahu doesn't become this hero, Benjamin Netanyahu, or Nitai as he changed his name, would live today in the United States, would have been a big businessman in the United States, would be very, very popular among the Jewish establishment. I have many doubts that he would have lived here. Like, by the way, most of his family.
Graduate of MIT, he is an Israeli, and he is a man who has written widely on this question before the House tonight. Do the Palestinians have a right to a separate state? Well, Mr. Jam has been talking about human rights.
Well, I think that no, I don't think they do.
During the first Gulf War, Netanyahu became a fixture on CNN, using the platform to link then PLO chairman Yasser Arafat to Saddam Hussein, encouraging American regime change against both. He rose to his first term in the Prime Minister's office after the assassination of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin by a right-wing fanatic. Many, including Rabin's wife, accused Netanyahu of inciting the murder. Here, he can be seen just a month before Rabin's assassination, speaking at a rally of settlers vehemently opposed to the Prime Minister's policies. After the rally, Netanyahu was photographed marching just ahead of a mock coffin of Rabin and a hangman's rope. Yossi Beilin was one of Prime Minister Rabin's closest confidants and a minister in his cabinet.
You were very close to Prime Minister Rabin and his wife, Leah. Is it true she partially blames Netanyahu's rhetoric for her husband's assassination, and what do you think of that?
I think it was the biggest shock in our history in the last 70 years. Now, there is no question that Netanyahu was part of the machinery against Rabin, including in the very famous demonstration in which his coffin was carried by some people. Not that Netanyahu himself initiated this idea. I was interviewed by the CNN, and I was asked about his role. And I said, you know, I'm sure that when he heard about it, he was shocked like myself and said like myself. I am sure that he never intended, God forbid, something like that. Like none of us dreamt that such a nightmare can become a reality. But retroactively, you cannot exonerate him from his part in the incitement. And then I got a phone call from Leah. And she said, she was so angry with me. And she said, how come you said something like this? You know his role. You know what he did.
After 9/11, Netanyahu returned to the political opposition and international public relations schemes. He remarked that the attacks on the Twin Towers were, quote, good for Israel, or at least its PR goals. Soon after, he appeared before Congress to hype up the invasion of Iraq.
You're making a connection between the Taliban and Iraq?
Yes, I am. I'm saying that if you look at those who harbor terrorists and those who support terrorists,
I guess I was looking for a connection between September 11th and my understanding why we went to the Taliban is there was a connection there. They were harboring somebody that we believed did the act on September 11th.
Yes, that's the first reason why you did it.
Now you're going to take me from September 11th to Iraq somehow?
Yes, but I'm saying something else. Obviously, we'd like to see a regime change, at least I would, in Iran, just as I would like to see in Iraq. If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region.
In this leaked video, Netanyahu boasts to a family of settlers that he manipulates Washington with ease.
Especially today with the U.S., I know how they are. America is something that you can easily maneuver and move in the right direction. And if they say something, so then they say something. So what? 80% of Americans support us.
His ability to move America was put to the test when he was elected for his second term in 2009, just as the Obama administration came into office pledging a reset with the Arab world and diplomacy with Iran.
Obama's here to pressure Israel for Netanyahu told him to off, and that's how we do it here in Israel, baby. Yeah. Himself.
Transformed into what some called the BB-sitter, Obama suffered through a series of humiliating lectures by Netanyahu and was once caught on a hot mic with French President Nicolas Sarkozy complaining about his relationship with the Prime Minister.
Well, an open mic catches President Obama and French President Nicolas Sarkozy in the middle of a catty conversation about Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Nicolas Sarkozy called Benjamin Netanyahu a liar.
Obama, according to a French interpreter who was translating his remarks, replied, "You're fed up with him, but I have to deal with him even more often than you."
Meanwhile, Netanyahu deployed everything in his arsenal to push the U.S. into attacking Iran. At the 2012 gathering of the Israel lobbying organization AIPAC, Netanyahu whipped out exchanges between the World Jewish Congress and the U.S. Department of War regarding the bombing of Auschwitz. He then likened America's failure to bomb the railways to Auschwitz to its failure to bomb Iran.
He believed that God sent him to save people of Israel from the Persian nuclear weapon. I'm serious. I'm not joking. He's like this. He believed that he's the only one that he can do that.
Despite a $100 million Israel lobbying campaign, Netanyahu and his cutouts failed to prevent the historic Iran deal. Back home, meanwhile, Netanyahu had won a sweeping electoral victory with a last-minute warning that buses full of Arabs were descending on the polls. Emboldened by his success, he lashed out with renewed fury at his critics in the media. Veteran Israeli journalist Yigal Sarna was sued by Netanyahu after he took to Facebook to detail an incident in which a furious Sarah Netanyahu allegedly forced her husband from his car along the side of a highway. In 2017, he was ordered by an Israeli court to pay just over $28,000 to Netanyahu and his wife.
All over the world, in many newspapers, including USA, there was some story about my wife didn't throw me out of the car, of Bibi Netanyahu saying this in court. So if he wanted to eliminate this story, he got just the opposite result. And it is many of the things is according to her rage. And in this case, I think she was the one who pushed to sue me. And it's a couple, a very powerful couple. Remind me of Macbeth of Shakespeare and his wife, that is the one who pushed him in many ways to do the worst things.
Sarah Netanyahu has not helped her husband's image. Besides paying out thousands to Mehdi Naftali in his lawsuit alleging abuse, Sarah has been sued for mistreatment by a former female staffer who said the prime minister's wife forced her to wash her hands over 100 times and change her clothes 10 times a day.
The abuse in that home was not only towards me. I am a strong person. I can face Mrs. Netanyahu. I can express my opinion. But the people around me, all those working in the prime minister's residence, they're weaker people. And she was very cruel to them. They would cry in the middle of the day or leave the house and return, and then they would either quit or be fired.
Prosecutors announced their intention to indict Sarah for fraud in 2017. Months later, she was recorded berating a publicist for failing to highlight her professional qualifications. As the Netanyahu family's scandals widened, Netanyahu's son Yair took to Facebook to post an alt-right meme alleging that George Soros, the Illuminati, and reptilian shapeshifters were behind his father's legal travails. The post earned Yair Netanyahu a celebratory feature from the Daily Stormer, an online neo-Nazi magazine. The embarrassment extended into the new year, when a 2015 recording surfaced this January of a drunken Yair bantering with his pals outside of a Tel Aviv strip club. Yair can be heard here begging the son of Israeli oligarch Kobi Maimon for money to pay a prostitute.
חייב לפרגן לי, אחי. אבא שעשה לאבא שלך אחלה עסקה, אחי. נלחם בכנסת בשביל זה, אחי. מה? אבא שנלחם. לחם לנו. זהו, לחם לנו 25 אח שיסדר לי. אבא שיסדר לך עכשיו $20 מיליארד. תפרגן לי ב-400 שקל.
The recording was made by a security guard driver while he transported Yair and his friends between strip clubs and sold to Israel's Channel 2 News. The guard is now being sued by his former employer.
This is something I don't like it. It's something which is, let's say, yellow journalism, saying that the wife said that, the son said that. This is something, this is something marginal and unimportant. What's important? What's he doing?
For Palestinians, Netanyahu's alleged corruption pales in comparison to the role he played in Israel's 2014 assault on the Gaza Strip. A UN commission described the devastation left by that attack as, quote, unprecedented.
It's a pity that Mr. Netanyahu is investigated because of corruption and because of small financial issues. At the time that I want him to be investigated and sentenced because of the crimes in Gaza.
100,000 homes were destroyed, and 551 children were killed during the 51-day war.
He doesn't like to pay for his food and his cigars and his wine. This is the only problem of Mr. Netanyahu. I think what's going on, it's like Al Capone. Al Capone was arrested and sentenced because of tax violation, the tax laws in the States. And now Netanyahu he did all the crimes in the world, and he's sentenced because of some cigars and some wine. And it's a pity.
While we were in Jerusalem, Syrian air defenses downed an Israeli jet engaged in hostile action over Syrian territory. Once again, Netanyahu is at the center of a region on the brink of war. At home, he is lashing out at a growing cast of enemies, from the police to the press. And while he commands a powerful constituency, Netanyahu is increasingly alone.
You see it now with Netanyahu, his personal relationship, if they exist with world leaders, have no meaning when it comes to policy.
It's not just about champagne and cigars. The Prime Minister picked powerful people and created a defensive wall around himself. That's what is happening today.
And it's endless looking for loyalty and flattering, etc. So and after a process of 30 years, it doesn't have any friends.
Like